Welcome to this LinkedIn Live for Women Leaders. My name is Helena de Muynck. I'm your host. I'm a transformation guide for smart, conscious, and high achieving women. And I am here today with Jim Swan. Jim is a business analyst and consultant, and he is focusing on slow lead generation. As such, that is already a topic for a session, I believe. Welcome, Jim.
Thank you.
Very happy to have you here.
It's good to be with you, Helena.
How are you doing?
I'm well, thank you. Yeah, week's off to a great start.
You were choosing a topic for our session and you chose for the power of mindfulness, balancing ambition with inner peace. And I love that kind of paradox at first sight. I'm really very interested to find out more and to learn from your views on that. So, Jim, kick off the power of mindfulness. How do you relate mindfulness and ambition?
I think in the world that we live in today, Helena, it's a constant conversation. I don't think it's a once and done deal. I think it's something that I know I personally return to over and over again, sometimes many times in a day. We're so bombarded by an ambition mindset where life can't be okay unless we're striving to get ahead, to better ourselves or to better our neighbor or to better a colleague at work or to better the fictitious advertisement that we've just been influenced by. It's rather relentless. And to find a way to create a buffer that allows us to function in a mindful manner. Ooh, I get tired just thinking about it sometimes.
Yeah, but basically, you are defining ambition a lot broader than the traditional ambition in the pure professional sense of the word. If here you're talking about advertising and media, you're talking about neighbors, you're talking about a broad scala of activities that you relate to ambition. Is that correct?
I suppose so, although I'm not sure how you parse the two out and separate them.
Yeah.
I'd be curious to hear thoughts on that because I see it as a very sort of contiguous thread that runs through so much of our lives.
Yeah. It's about achievement. It's about goals. It's about goal setting and achieving goals in many areas of our lives. That's what you mean. Yeah.
I think it moves beyond just setting goals. I think it moves into well, as with most things, if they're out of balance, they're problematic. If there is a balance to them, maybe not so much of a problem. But I think in the context of my thoughts on this, ambition, not a bad thing. You know, setting goals, not a bad thing. But I think becoming so passionately and single-mindedly focused on the outcome that we lose sight of the moment. That's, I think, where we start getting into problems.
Yeah.
You know, when we sacrifice what's happening in the here and now, the relationship, the colleague, the mentee that we're working with, the team member, the client, if we lose sight of that because our eye is constantly on that thing in the future, that thing that is fictitious. It may never come. It certainly will never come the way we think it's going to come.
Yeah.
We've proven that over time. At least I have in my life. I argue that we're much better suited, not just in our experience in the moment, but in our relationships across the board, if we can stay rooted and grounded in the moment. And I think that only happens when we exercise that fleeting thing called mindfulness that keeps us tied to what's happening in the here and now.
Yeah. In my experience, in my work with women that I coach, just in my general conversations, what I feel that is that people are living either in the past and they're ruminating about the past, or they are living in the future and either they are very anxious about the future, which is happening more and more. If you see what is going on in the world and especially the way that media are reporting about it, or they are, like you say, dreaming and have these very high ambitions and things they want to achieve. And both places, I think, are very relevant to visit once in a while. But if you're only there, only in the past, or mostly living in the future, it's like you say, you are not in the moment and you are basically also not enjoying what you're doing. Writing a lot of scripts, where probably 90 or 95% of them will never happen in the future, or ruminating about the past that you can never change because it has happened. And the only useful thing you can do with it is learn your lessons and use them as stepping stones for growth and for doing better, more effective, and more efficient. I feel that a lot of people lose this touch with the present and also are not capable to be present in whatever they're doing. The simple, we all know the examples of people that go to a restaurant having dinner and they're all on their own mobiles. Sometimes you see a whole family, 4 or 5 people, all individually on their mobile. And that is the how do you say, the caricatural version of it, but it is also something that we do in general, multitask or having conversations while we're doing something else. So how do we do that? How can we learn to go back, to connect back with this present moment and find joy and fulfillment in that? What are your strategies or your ideas around that?
As I mentioned earlier, for me, it's really an ongoing practice. I don't
Mm-hmm.
think it's a destination that we say, we've arrived and now everything is
Mm-hmm.
perfect. But the touchstones that I go back to regularly in my life, the ongoing practice of meditation, and that
Mm-hmm.
can sound, I think, often in and of itself ethereal and unattainable and ooh, a meditation practice. Do you trek to the top of a mountain every morning? No, I don't do that. But I think there's that lingering perception that people have when they hear the word meditation.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the great revolutionary moments for me in my understanding of meditation was hearing someone, I'm going to be at a loss to remember who it was I was listening to, but they talked about doing walking meditation, and it was a
Mm-hmm.
concept I'd never heard of before.
Yeah.
The more I listened, the more I found it really quite intriguing. This idea that I could be moving through an experience, a moment in time, that I could be out for a walk or a hike in the morning, and I could be meditating, focusing on the current step, and then only paying attention to where my foot was going to land next.
Mm.
And I found that to be such an empowering kind of aha moment for me,
Yeah.
because suddenly meditation wasn't this top of the mountain, incense burning kind of experience. It
Mm.
was this very pragmatic, and I've practiced it long enough now that even there are moments when I'm like walking to my car from the grocery store, or having stopped to see a friend and walking back out, or walking to the up the drive to pick up the mail, and I'm conscious of that next step, and it's a
Mm-hmm.
moment, just sometimes a split second, that I'm able to be totally present in the moment.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
it's the more I do it, the more I can't wait to do it again.
Yeah, I love that concept. I have to say that mindful walking is also something that I read about once.
Mm,
And since I walk very often because I have a dog. So even if I don't want to walk, there's somebody
sure.
here, how can you say that, making very heavy suggestions to do that.
Right.
This mindful walking, I have to say, sometimes I walk and I have some things in my head because I have an issue or I have something that I would like to think about deeper. And I do that when I'm walking, which is not bad at all because sometimes the brightest ideas come when I'm not really productive behind my computer or in a conversation. But the mindful walks where you basically, like you say, enjoy the steps you are making and also are very much aware of the noises and the temperature and the wind breeze and everything that you see without really activating it. They are so relaxing for your mind. Basically, they also calm your reptilian brain in
Mhm.
terms of when you're like, oh, I don't know an answer for this, I have no solution for that. We also always, especially when we're working, we want to go into the action and have results because people are waiting for those results or waiting for those answers. And if you can just leave that and go into these mindful walks, basically when you go back behind your computer or you go back taking your pen and writing your things, you get completely different perspectives. And
Yeah.
it's like you have been activating other neuron connections in your brain without even doing something. I think
Mhm.
we are very much in an era of doing. Sometimes I feel like we're more human doings than human beings, and we lose connection with ourselves and with our environment and with all the signs and the resources that we can access there. Yeah.
No,
Mm.
very true. We
Yeah.
miss life when we're not paying attention. I mean,
Yeah.
I can think of many, but to my shame, probably thousands of moments in my life that I just completely missed because
Mm.
my mind was somewhere else.
Yeah.
And there are
Mm.
moments that I'll never get back. There's, yeah, wow.
Mm.
I,
Yeah.
I don't carry a lot of regrets around, but there are a couple that come up when I think about that, and they do make me sad. Lessons
Mm.
learned, and I try to be better and not do it again. But
Yeah.
taking that concept of the mindful walking and applying it to well, really to every act of life.
Yeah.
I think it was Eckhart Tolle that talks about a mindful cup of tea, of being so present in the process of just boiling the water and making that single cup of tea
Mm.
that just
Yeah.
opens up completely different worlds, worlds that in our busyness, sometimes in our rush to achieve the
Yeah.
goals that we've set, we
Mm-hmm.
miss we miss those worlds,
Yeah.
where ideas can come, where connections can be made, where inspiration happens. You know,
Mm.
I love that.
Absolutely.
I may not get this completely right, but I recall the story that's told about Einstein working on the theory of relativity, and that he had worked at it. And at some point, he had to step away, and he went and drew a hot bath and submerged himself in the hot water. And it was in
Mm-hmm.
that hot water, letting the body relax. I can only imagine letting his mind relax,
Mm-hmm.
that the connection was made and he
Yeah.
understood this
Mm-hmm.
thing that we still try to wrap our little brains around. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
good stuff
Yeah.
can happen.
Wasn't that the Eureka moment? I think I heard
You're,
that story also. I read it also. Yeah.
yeah, Eureka.
I love that. Yeah. And I believe that I can believe that for many people, also for me, sometimes it's very difficult to find this mindful moments or to really practice this mindfulness. And what works for me is installing rituals. You were talking about tea, for example. Every
Mhm.
morning I make my liter and a half tea. I have the special machine. It's like a coffee machine, but it's a tea
Mhm.
machine. It's a little bit sophisticated in terms of you can define the temperature and then the duration and things, and it's with a filter. Very, I use it every day, and basically this is my ritual. Only making the tea because I set my intention in terms of okay, what is today is going to be like, and how do I want to show up, and what do I need? And then I open my cupboard with a lot of different teas, and then I pick the tea that I think that will support me and my
Mhm.
system for the rest of the day based on what I am going to do. And so only even making that tea and hearing it, and then you have the little thing, and then you put in your leaves, and then you have a full can of tea that you put in your thermos. For me, this is a ritual, and I'm already enjoying the idea that I will have until late afternoon, that I will have all my teas or my infusions because it's not caffeine, it's all healthy stuff.
Yeah.
And these are rituals.
Mhm.
And I think if we install rituals for these little things and then stack them, once the ritual is embodied and integrated, we do another one and we combine them. So we build that mindfulness in our daily practice. Sometimes it helps to set an alarm to to keep help us mindful.
Oh yeah.
But I believe if you install rituals and you stick to them, and you start over one day, it didn't work, you just continue the next day. That's a way to build that mindfulness into our lives.
Absolutely. I
Yeah.
wholeheartedly agree with that. I
Mm,
use my calendar reminders on my calendar 5 times during my day. I get a reminder,
mm,
and it's just a little phrase that pops up that reminds me to recenter myself.
yeah.
And other days that I ignore them, of course there are. But there have been many a day when I could have very easily careened off into fear or doubt or any number of those dark places that our mind can often take us to.
Mm-hmm.
And I get the little notification on my phone. It helps me to return to a place, or try to return to a place of
Mm,
centeredness and
yeah.
a better balance. Yeah.
Absolutely. And it doesn't take that much time, and it's all very accessible, because what you mentioned there reminds me of what I do, and I don't really need my timer for that, because I do it every time I enter like an important meeting, or I will start
Mhm.
like a coaching session or even a presentation, is I do 2 or 3 minutes of box breathing.
Mhm.
And that's the box breathing is what also the Navy SEALs are using just before they
Mhm.
go into the action. And it is basically balancing and restoring physiologically also your brain. And for people in the audience who do not know what is box breathing, it is basically breathing in for 5 times, holding for 5 times, breathing out for 5 counts, and then holding again for 5 counts. And so if you do that like for 2 or 3 minutes, this cycle, you're completely rebalancing your body. And also physiologically, you tell your reptilian brain that sometimes it's very activated because it's stressful and when whatever, you tell your brain, like, calm down. There's nothing going on, no life-threatening things. We're just going to balance again, and you are going to be focused and full of attention for your next task, or your next engagement, or
Mhm.
conversation. And that works for me very good, because it's like a 2 minute, extremely accessible thing you can do everywhere at any time. And it restores your focus, because we are talking about focus and attention. But I believe that even although we are talking about that a lot and we see the relevance of it, still it is very difficult for people to be focused and to have attention. Attention for the conversation, for example. We now have a conversation with each other. We have an audience, of course, but we are fully focused on our topic and on our conversation and on each other. But just think of how many people are having conversations while they, even if they're not on their phone, when you're lucky, they're just somewhere else with their minds, or they're already thinking to formulate the argument for the next sentence that the other person will say, and they're not listening, they're not open, they're not curious, they're not receiving basically what is coming. They're already in a kind of resistance, or in a mindset of I need to win here, or I need to get out of this as much as possible, things like that, which is also absolutely not mindful to
No,
have conversations like that.
no, it's a
And
it's a
it's not
pretty it's a pretty
contributing to inner peace.
no, it's not contributing to inner peace. It's not contributing to really building a relationship with
Mm-hmm.
whoever it is that you're speaking to or speaking
Yeah.
with. I mean, it
Mm-hmm.
really does become you're speaking to them.
Yeah.
You've forfeited the exchange, and you really become just this. You're just delivering whatever it is you have to say, and the other person
Mm-hmm.
really becomes irrelevant. And
Mm.
that's a sad way to move through life, I think.
Yeah. Absolutely. We lose a lot by that. It is. And I think that especially if you want to introduce mindfulness, not only in your own life, but also in the life of your family or of your team, that you can also create like these little ceremonies that people can connect with the principle of mindfulness, with the principle of attention, with the principle of presence, so people can learn that, and there's some like framework that people can interact in, so it makes it a little bit easier. Is that something that makes sense to you, Jim?
Oh, completely does. In fact, as you were saying that, it floated to the surface in my mind a retreat that I did a while back and used an exercise with the group, a very simple exercise, listening exercise, or beyond listening. It was an exercise that built group dynamic. It's just very simple. It's the yes and exercise, where
Mm-hmm.
no matter
For
what's
people who are
being
not familiar with that, can you explain that a little bit?
sure, this idea that in an exchange of ideas, so this is particularly helpful in a workspace or if there's any creative efforts going on, of listening and hearing what's being said, offering an affirmation, yes, and rather than going down the path of using the little three-letter word but, which means I'm going to now separate myself from what you said and I'm going to now deliver the really important thing.
Mm-hmm.
We say yes and you tack something onto that thought. You add to the conversation
Mm-hmm.
and then wait for the same thing to come back to you. And it's just such
Yeah.
a small little small little thing, but it makes
Hmm.
such a radical difference.
Yeah.
I ran into just this past Sunday one of the people that was part of that retreat, which was last year, probably in July. So almost a year it's come up. And they mentioned that even in their family,
Hmm.
where they took that exercise and brought it back to their family, they said that their oldest daughter had just engaged in a yes and experience in the car driving earlier that morning. And I
Yeah.
just thought, oh, isn't that nice? Isn't that nice?
Mm. Yeah. I love that. I believe also that this is a practice that you can do and you can learn and you can like train. And at the same time, it also impacts your mindset. Because basically, if you say yes and instead of yes but, you bring that from with a mindset that is showing curiosity, but also validation and acceptance and respect for what is being brought to the table and basically receiving it. It is a mindset of non-resistance. And I am pretty sure that if you practice that enough and you can really embody it, that by definition, your mindset will also change. And as a coach, of course, we work from the other side because we are trained to validate and sponsor and reflect on what people are saying. And yesterday I had a workshop. I had a full day workshop on a Sunday. It was amazing. It was on strategic agility. And we were with a group of women and we were basically sharing stories. One of the first things was storytelling and the
Mm.
way that we tell the story, how it has an impact on what we learn from it. Basically, it's rescripting it in order to learn from it rather than to be in a victim role and situation and being and ruminating about it. And what we did there was I was teaching the women how to validate and how to reflect and basically, because of this instruction or suggestion or invitation to reflect, you could almost see their ears opening. They were listening a lot more attentively because the idea was that they were going to reflect and they were going to do that as a support on the story. And then the reflecting itself was so powerful and they felt it. It was like opening their heart for what the person was telling. And then the person receiving the reflection was like, whoa, that was a very strong feedback afterwards. Like this reflecting exercise was, you know, magic. And this is such a beautiful example of mindfulness, of really actively listening and engaging in what the other person is saying, and then reflecting it in a respectful way to make sure that we understood what she was saying and then leaving the space for corrections if there were like if there was incompleteness or a misunderstanding. And having that kind of conversation is something that we very rarely do because in meetings there's a time bound. We only have 1 hour and we have 75 points on the agenda. So we are just pushing everything through. And in a lot of conversations we have at home, one is watching television, the other one is on Facebook or on Twitter or whatever. We don't have these conversations and they're so extremely valuable and they're so extremely mindful. And I would like to open an invitation here to try that. If you're listening or if you're listening to the replay, to try that, to be very curious and receiving what people are saying, but instead of going into defense or into resistance or into a winning modus, like I have a better point or I have a more important situation or whatever, just be present in that conversation and in the connection, and beautiful things happen.
They do.
Yeah.
Consistently. They do. Yeah,
Mm.
they really
Yeah.
do. You mentioned something earlier that I think is just such a timely topic, and it's the antithesis of what you've just been describing and that we've been exploring. And it goes, you mentioned it earlier, this idea of multitasking, that when we are doing two or three things at once, there's plenty of studies out there right now. Anyone that holds on to the idea that multitasking gets you anywhere,
Under a rock.
yeah, they've been living under a rock, and yet you still see it. You know,
Yeah.
I was on a Zoom call this morning, and one of the participants was clearly in the middle of 2 or 3 projects, one on their phone and one on another screen, and they were undoubtedly not engaged in
Mm.
the conversation that we were participating in.
Yeah.
And not only did they miss points, which were obvious in things that they said as the experience went on, but it was just rather disrespectful to everyone else that had shown
Mm.
up and was being present.
Yeah.
And I think that's so unfortunate and yet so indicative of the way some people, and I've been guilty of it myself. Who am I kidding? I've done that, and I regret
Mm-hmm.
it. I regret not being present for another person or another group of people who've set out time from their busy schedules and all the things that their life demands of them. Far
Mm-hmm.
better to show up and participate wholly and
Yeah.
entirely to make
And
the
contribute.
experiences
Mm-hmm.
and contribute. Yeah, so much
Mm-hmm.
more powerful. And I
Yeah.
have to believe, and I haven't experienced it yet, but I guess I dream about this, of being able to show up so wholeheartedly that someone actually notices, like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, wow, you really are so present. I just think that would
Yeah.
be such a cool moment. It'd be cool to be able to observe it, to watch someone show up so completely present for a meeting or an exchange or even just having coffee. I think that would add a layer of deliciousness to life. Yeah.
Yeah, but don't you think that we do that sometimes? I would like to say that I feel myself showing up
Mhm.
present most of the time.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I even have sometimes conversations with my partner who says, "Why is your phone off?" I said, "Because I have a conversation with, you have a conversation with your sister." I said, "Yes, I have lunch with my sister. So I want to be there.
Right.
But what if I need you for something very urgent?" And I say, "Then there are ways to let me know. But I don't think that hour will make a difference. I want to be with my sister." I even have that. I shared that story already. Sometimes when I forget to take off my phone, because my phone is mostly off.
Yeah.
And that's very irritating, apparently, for many people. But that's okay because I don't get a lot of calls. They
Mhm.
WhatsApp me, they email me, mainly they WhatsApp me. So I know if I have a phone call, that is probably not somebody that is close to me.
Right.
And so
Right.
sometimes I'm cooking, and then my partner says, "Your phone is ringing." I say, "I know, I'm cooking." Your phone is ringing. I say, "I know, but I'm cooking and I want to continue my cooking because I enjoy doing what I'm doing now, and I will see who it is later." But, and so a lot of people are like basically also the victim of their phone and of all these notifications. All my notifications are off. They're off. WhatsApp notifications, LinkedIn notifications, all these things. I mean, I do a lot with my mobile, but when I want to. And so for me, like cooking is something that I am doing. It's not something that I'm doing that. Or when I walk, I never take my phone on, except
Mhm.
for on a long walk, because sometimes there
Yeah.
might be something going on.
Right.
But I don't
Mhm.
take my phone because I want to walk. I want to be with my dog and in nature. And sometimes that is very strange for people to understand. And then I say, just try it. Just try that you are just left alone for half an hour or an hour, and you can do what you want to do without disturbance. And you are basically organizing your life. Your life is not organized by the phone and the WhatsApp and the email pings that are coming up. The same is with the notifications on the computer. I sometimes I don't manage to get, or I forgot to really put it off my WhatsApp, and then they show up here. I don't understand how you could function like that with all these things going everywhere. We already are so triggered by so many things in general, and then we keep adding to that by basically not managing our phone. And it's
Mhm.
very easy to just take it off. There's this little V,
A
you
little.
just take it off.
Yeah.
That's all.
Yep.
And some people are like, "Oh, because then what if?" And I say, "What if?" But this could be like a 1 in a 10,000 times situation that is basically controlling your whole life every day and every minute of every day, which is to me a little bit crazy. I know it's a hard word, but not that the people that are allowing that are crazy, but as a situation, as a context to live in, it is crazy. And it is something from the last decades. I was talking this morning with somebody, and I was telling her that I was explaining my son that when I was young, I had There was one phone in the house. It was on on a coffee table. It was connected to the wall. And so if you wanted to use that phone, you had intentionally had to go there and dial the number and wait and hope that somebody was there in the house. And if we were making arrangement with friends to go somewhere, we could not change that last minute because we could not, there was nobody we could tell that we changed our minds.
Right.
So if we said at 7 we're going to be there, and on our little bicycles we went there, we didn't change our mind at a quarter to 7 and say no, we go somewhere else, and we will alert everybody else that they changed their camino, their way.
Yeah.
And he was like, how can you live like that? And I said, well, I think that life was a lot more mindful, a lot more simple,
Mhm.
a lot easier. And I think it is impossible to go back there, but it is possible to think of what we are doing and what we are impacted by and how tech and all these things are running our lives instead of us.
Yeah, I think you hit the real issue on the head there. It's so easy to feel like our technology controls our lives. And that's a lie. And that's a lie that the marketing departments of Apple and Samsung and all of these companies have foisted on us. They all have off switches.
Mm-hmm.
They all have off switches. So that we were taught a lesson many years ago when we were children around our family dinner table, going way, way back when the phone would ring. I can remember my father saying it. I'll remember it as long as I live. Just because a phone rings doesn't mean you have to answer it. And then as time went by, and I remember we had begged for it for a long time, and finally Dad relented, and we got an answering machine at the house, for the one phone in the house, in the kitchen. And just because that little light beep was flashing doesn't mean I can retrieve that message at any time. It doesn't have to
Mm.
happen at this moment.
Yeah.
But just the idea that we make those decisions. And for those who are willing to experiment with it, having even just a few moments
Mm-hmm.
of control, where
Mm-hmm.
we take back that control and we say, you know what, for the next 15 minutes, I'm just going to shut all my electrical stuff down,
Mm-hmm.
shut my phone off, close the computer. I'm just going to have a few minutes of peace and quiet.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And for those willing, and I challenge people, it's a brave thing to try because it's so foreign to our day-to-day existence.
Mm-hmm.
But I dare them to try it and not continue trying it. Because if you really show up honestly and willing to explore what those 10 or 15 or whatever time frame you place on it, whatever it is, if you will show up honestly and really experience the moment, be present and check in with your body and see what your mind
Mm-hmm.
is saying and what your body is saying and what your environment is saying. Oh my God. There's a story, again, I think it was an Eckhart Tolle story of a man who had lived in the same village his entire life, so 40 or 50 years, and then having had an experience of awakening to his consciousness and to his who he was, he had never heard the church bells ring before from the town hall. He had lived there his entire life. He wanted to know where those bells were coming from. His mind had been so busy with all the things that he missed
Yeah.
something is that beautiful. So birds
Mm.
chirping, children playing, whatever it is, we can miss great chunks of our moments in life if we're not paying attention.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think I would say if you challenge people to turn off or switch off every device for 10 or 15 minutes, they could use this time to go in nature, to go outside, and to learn to really experience this mindfulness about this is something that I practice very often, like a presence exercise in terms of how you are connected with the universe. And you can do that when you are outside, of course. Also, you can do it when you're inside in terms of, okay, how do I feel? How do I feel basically the gravity working on my body? Where do I feel tension? How's the temperature? How does it feel on my skin? How do my clothes feel on my skin? What do I notice? What if I look around in the room? What is there that I know it's there, but it never really lands? Things like that. You can be during these 10 or 15 minutes, you can do something that is completely different from your daily routine. And that is basically anchoring you in your real existence and in your essence. And this is something that might be a little bit awkward the first time or the first times, but it's not. Basically, it's not. It's just observing with all your senses that we also don't use a lot, with all our senses, observing what is surrounding us and what we are connected with. And basically only doing that is I'm actually doing the things while I'm talking to you. So I'm not completely actively present in doing that. And it shifts already for me, even by telling about it and doing it a little bit. So the impact is tremendous in just being observing things and observing yourself. Because this is something that we don't learn. I see that in a lot of situations. A simple example is when you are in a meeting as an executive, as a leader, or as an entrepreneur, you are in a meeting. We are so fully in the conversation. We are so fully basically already with our mind what we want to get out of this conversation, what we need to bring to the table, the points that want to make, that we are basically also not observing the meeting and the meeting partners. And for me, it's a leadership skill. It is to be able to also be out of the conversation and in an observer modus, like being a fly on the ceiling and looking at the process. What is going on here? How is the energy? Who is silent? Who is talking? And why? Are we moving? Are all the points that are relevant brought to the table? Is everybody able to contribute and to participate? And if not, what can I do in order to change the setting or to change the interaction so everybody can participate and can contribute? And you need to go, we call it meta, you need to go in meta, in observer modus. And I understand or I see that very few people are able to do that.
Mm.
And we can do the same with ourselves, like being the observer, which is, so Eckhart Tolle, being the observer in ourselves is the essence. It's the one that doesn't change. And it's the one that is noticing what is going on and then is also able to adapt and change these things. But we are so in our moments and in our emotions and in our ambitions to go back to where we started that we are not really understanding or aware of how we show up and how this is impactful or not, or impactful in the wrong way. And so it's also my invitation to observe more from a very neutral point, without judgment, without emotion. And the first way to learn that is just to observe your environment. Does that make sense, Jim?
Completely makes sense.
Mm,
The idea, I always take it back to listening because I've always enjoyed the experience of listening to what is going on around me. And it's one thing to listen to what someone has said, but to be able to listen to what's behind the words, to understand the energy that those words come from, what's not being said, sometimes as important, if not more important than the actual words that are being said.
mm,
It's somewhat like the exercise of walking in the forest. If you look at the canopy of leaves on a tree overhead, it can be an overwhelming cacophony of shades of green and gold. But when you stop and think about just picking two of the leaves and focusing on the space between those two leaves,
mm,
suddenly the canopy is no longer overwhelming. You've brought laser focus, laser attention to just that one space between two leaves. And if
mm,
you're willing to let your heart and your imagination and all of those things go with it, think of the worlds that exist, the worlds of thought and ideas and creativity that exists just between those two leaves. Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. Who wouldn't go back to the forest for another experience like that? I think it's pretty special.
I'll keep that one in mind
Yeah,
tomorrow.
try that one. Try
I
that one.
keep that one in mind. Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah.
But as we are talking now, basically being mindful is extremely accessible. I'm not going to say it's easy, but it's very accessible if we put our mind to it. If we build in rituals, if we maybe build in trackers or little alerts, little things that help us, if we involve other people that are close to us to do these things together and to have mindful conversations or mindful meals or mindful board game sessions or
Mhm.
things like that, because also these things are a little bit lost. Not a lot of people do that. It's the gaming thing now or the Netflix thing, which is okay
Mhm.
as such. But so there's so many ways that we can introduce this in our life.
Yeah.
We already talked about benefits, but if you look at it in general, what do you feel are the real benefits of implementation of mindfulness and finding that balance between ambition and inner peace?
I think there's a list of things that I might end up answering that with. I think the first one though, and it's one that I'm only just now really just beginning to understand, but it's an alignment of my goals and my objectives with who I really am, who the
Mm-hmm.
reality of who I am is, and discovering some days to my shock and horror, some days to more gentle moments of gratitude, how very different the outcomes, the destination begins to look, how very different it begins to look from
Mm-hmm.
if you had asked me that same question 10 years ago or even 5 years ago in my life. I had all these goals and all of these objectives that, as it turns out, had nothing to do with who I was, who I am. They had everything to do with people around me, people that I had heard about, thought about, imagined, seen in the media, seen in the entertainment world. But again, nothing to do with my
Mm-hmm.
truth. And so seeing that those two begin to align and come closer and closer together just leaves me speechless. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
kind of speechless. And then simple things. I think my blood pressure isn't, I don't have a blood pressure problem. I don't
Mm-hmm.
have a cholesterol issue. My doctor, every time I go, yeah, put a few pounds on after COVID. I haven't quite been able to get those off, but doggone it, if my blood pressure isn't really low and my cholesterol levels are right where they're supposed to be,
Mm-hmm.
and my doctors, I don't know whatever you're doing, but keep on doing it. So physical health, being able to lay my head down on the pillow and fall asleep at night
Mm-hmm.
and having my mind be able to rest
Mm-hmm.
and not race and run constant. I can remember years ago, we didn't really talk about insomnia at that back in the ancient days, but I would lay in bed literally for 2 or 3 hours at a stretch, and I could
Mm-hmm.
not shut off my brain. It was just racing with plans and
Yeah.
ideas and strategies and how am I going to do this and what am I going to.
Mm-hmm.
It's been a long time since I've done that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I like that. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I
What I
think,
also like is that you, if I can reflect that to you,
mhm,
Jim, is that you are not only mindful in the ways that you achieve your goals, but I understand that you are also mindful in how you define your goals,
mm,
which is a completely different level. Because if you're mindful how you define your goals, then it means also that you align them with your values and with your identity. And that they're not like goals because you're supposed to chase that goals, or they're just societal goals, or things that corporates say that you have to achieve in order to be successful. If you are mindful also about your goals, then I think that's a very big win. It's a very big win. Yeah.
yeah, I would agree, most definitely.
Mm, yeah. I like
Mm.
that. But I interrupted you. There were some other benefits.
Oh yeah, what else? Oh, interpersonal relationships, of being able to show up for people in my life and to do it better than I've ever been able to do it before. Not coming to a conversation with friends with a full load of expectations and anticipation. This is what I need out of this conversation. But of really just being able to show up empty-handed and see what the moment brings.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Mm.
How rich and how wonderful that is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
Never did that many years ago. And I could go down that rabbit hole of regret and, oh, all those lost opportunities. Yes, they came and they went, and I missed that boat. But you know what? All of that has brought me to where I am today.
Yeah.
And all I have control over is the choices I make in this moment. If
Mhm.
I'm making choices that let me show up and be more present, I guess I'm
Yeah.
doing okay. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. What I would like to add, Jim, is two practices that I use and that also very much contribute to my mindfulness as a system in my life is that because you were talking about insomnia and all these thoughts that go through your head before you went to sleep, and sometimes you're there like 2 or 3 hours. Um, the same system can happen in the morning. I know a lot of people, they wake up and they start stressing about what they need to do and how they're going to do it. And they might already be late to do that. And they didn't do this yesterday. And now they have to do it that added on the plate for today. And they're gone. And before this first leg is on the floor, they're already full of stress. So my ritual in the morning is I stay in bed for a couple of minutes and I set my intention for that day. And that can be different depending on what I'm going to do that day. I set my intention, not in terms of my planning, but in terms of how I want to be in going through that day. And it is about my mindset, or it is about I'm going to cultivate because I know what is going to happen. I'm going to cultivate mildness today, or I'm going to cultivate patience today, or I'm going to make sure that I don't procrastinate today. So basically, it is about how I'm going to show up. And in the evening, I have a gratitude practice. And I just sit down 5 or 10 minutes. It's not like this is a ceremony.
Mm.
And I write about three things that I'm grateful for about my professional life, three things about my personal life, and three things that I'm grateful and happy for about me, about
Mm.
who I am and the way I have been um, showing up that day. That is
Mm.
ideally completely in line with my intentions.
Yeah.
But it also means that during the day, you have this reminders of your intention. And also because you have integrated a gratitude practice, you are also focused on what you're doing. And you are intentionally looking for little successes, for the little moments of joy and things where normally we are programmed and wired that way. We are focused on the things that don't go, that didn't work out. And so basically you are training your mind and your soul on I'm not saying on the positive in the way that you are not realistic, but
Mm.
you are focusing on learning moments, on growth moments, on successes. And you are also giving them words because when you write them down, you basically manifest them. And this is something especially women are not very good at explaining or telling, even to themselves, what they did good, what was a success today or this week or last month. So that could also be a tip for the audience in order to
Absolutely.
create that mindfulness, intention setting in the morning and gratitude practice in the evening. And yeah, I think with all the things we have already mentioned, it's like a complete manual, Jim. We gave countless possibilities to develop mindfulness, right?
We have covered some territory. Yes, we have.
Yeah, beautiful. I'm mindful of the hour, Jim. Is
Oh,
there like a
wonderful.
last word, a last advice?
The last word, I'm going to go with that this isn't about perfection. I know I get often tied up in this idea that, all right, if I'm going to be mindful, or if I'm going to meditate, or if I'm going to see the space between the leaves, I've got to do it perfectly. And there's no such thing. There's no such thing. We show up as flawed human beings working our way through this existence. And if you've given it your best, then your best is all that's required in that moment.
Mm.
And if you can hold on to that, maybe it makes our days a little bit easier.
Yeah, absolutely. It is progress over perfection. It's about just doing it. There's no such thing as a final point in mindfulness, and there's no such thing as a perfection in mindfulness because it's an ongoing process.
Yep.
Absolutely. Wonderful. That's great advice. I would say thank you so much, Jim, for this mindful conversation. You were very present. I must say, I can read and feel energies. I talk with a lot of people in very different contexts and situations, and the energy that you and the presence that you demonstrate, it shows that you are here, that you are very much present. And there's no way that you can have that without practicing mindfulness. So you're practically the living example of also what you express and how you talk and how you bring the information without it is very powerful to bring information and to have conversations in a very serene way and still very impactful. That
Mm.
combination is, for me, extremely powerful. And that is something that you are demonstrating. And I cannot thank you enough for being so generous here with your time and with your tips and advice. I'm very lucky and happy that you chose this topic, which is also a topic that is very close to my heart. So thank you so much for sharing your insights here with the audience. And for the audience, I can only invite you to try. We have given you so many possibilities to be more mindful. And I absolutely understand that some things are not your thing, that for some people, they say meditation doesn't work. Today, somebody told me that it means you didn't yet find the right kind of meditation because there's so many different kinds of meditations. But anyway, if some things don't work for you or do not resonate to you, that's fine. But I'm pretty sure that there will be other ones that will work for you or practices. And just challenge yourself. I know it's very hard for some people just to switch your device off or to just undo the notifications. Just try it, albeit for 15 minutes. You will see the sun will keep shining, the world will still turn, nobody will die. Just try it, give it a try, and see what the impact will be on you and on your life and on your mental presence. Go there, try things out, and thank you for being here mindfully. And looking forward to seeing you again. All right, take care. Thank you so much, Jim. Wonderful.
My pleasure. Thank you. Very much enjoyed that.